Wyoming Territory, 1872. The brutal winter had finally loosened its grip on the Laramie Basin, but for 18-year-old Nora Vaughn, the chill remained in her bones as she stared out the stagecoach window. The endless prairie stretched before her like her uncertain future, vast, unforgiving, and impossible to escape. "Almost there, miss," the driver called back. "Willow Creek, just ahead." Nora clutched the letter in her lap, the paper worn from countless readings. Uncle Samuel's handwriting was painfully clear. She was to marry Clayton Whalen, a widower with 3 children who needed a wife to help manage his ranch and family. A man she'd never met. A man 20 years her senior. The shame of her circumstances burned hot. After her parents' deaths from typhoid left her destitute, her uncle's solution had been swift and mercenary. She would be given to a stranger. Her youth, beauty, and virtue, particularly her virtue, as her uncle had emphasized repeatedly, were her only currency in this transaction. Nora had been raised to believe that a woman's highest purpose was to be a wife and mother, but she'd always secretly harbored a different belief, that true love should precede marriage, not follow it by mere chance. Now, that girlish dream seemed as distant as the Eastern finishing school she'd once attended. The stagecoach rolled into Willow Creek, little more than a cluster of wooden buildings clinging to existence along a dusty main street. Nora smoothed her blue traveling dress, adjusted her bonnet over her dark blonde hair, and gathered her courage. Her new life awaited, whether she wanted it or not. Standing on the weathered boardwalk outside the general store was a collection of townsfolk, clearly gathered to witness her arrival. Among them stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a stern expression. Clayton Whalen, her future husband. Her heart sank, but as she descended from the coach, her eyes caught on another figure. A young man, perhaps 25, with wheat-colored hair and clear blue eyes that widened as they met hers. He stepped forward, then hesitated, glancing at the older man. "Miss Vaughn." The older man approached, hat in hand. "I'm Howard Peterson, the town's pastor. Mr. Whalen sent word. There's been an accident." "An accident?" Nora's voice caught. 2 days ago, his horse spooked near the ravine. "I'm sorry to tell you, but Mr. Whalen didn't survive." The news should have brought relief, but instead, Nora felt only confusion and a strange guilt. "The children. That's why I'm here," the younger man said, stepping forward. His voice was deep yet gentle. "I'm Caleb Wright, Mr. Whalen's foreman. He left the ranch and children in my care until arrangements could be made." Pastor Peterson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private." Moments later, in the pastor's modest study, Nora learned the full story. Clayton Whalen had left everything, the ranch, his possessions, and guardianship of his 3 children, to his young foreman, Caleb Wright. "I don't understand what this means for me," Nora said, her gloved hands twisting in her lap. Caleb leaned against the pastor's desk, his expression troubled. "Mr. Whalen spoke of you often in his final weeks. He believed a woman's touch would benefit his children." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "But I cannot and will not hold you to an arrangement you made with another man." "The problem," Pastor Peterson interjected, "is that Miss Vaughn has come all this way with the understanding that she would have a home and security." Caleb straightened. "You'll have both at the Rocking W, Miss Vaughn. As a guest, not as anything else. Until you decide what you wish to do." Nora studied him. There was no hint of impropriety in his eyes, only concern and perhaps a touch of the same uncertainty she felt. "The children need someone," Caleb added softly. "They've lost their mother 2 years ago, and now their father. I know ranching, miss, but I know little about raising children." And so Nora found herself riding beside Caleb right in his wagon, headed toward the Rocking W Ranch, her future once again uncharted. The silence between them stretched, punctuated only by the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional nickering of the horses. "You worked for Mr. Whalen long?" Nora finally asked. 5 years. Caleb's hands were steady on the reins. "Came west after the war with nothing but the clothes on my back. He gave me a chance when others wouldn't." "Because of the war?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Because of what happened after. I made mistakes. Got involved with the wrong people. Clayton saw something in me worth salvaging." Nora nodded. "And the children?" "Emma's 10. Strong-willed like her father. James is 7, quiet but clever. Little Sarah's just turned 4. She barely remembers her mother. As the wagon crested a rise, the ranch came into view. A sturdy two-story house stood proudly against the backdrop of distant mountains, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and rolling pastures. Cattle dotted the landscape, and a small creek wound its way through the property. "It's beautiful," Nora whispered. "It's hard work," Caleb corrected, though a hint of pride colored his voice. "But yes, it's beautiful too." 3 small figures burst from the house as the wagon approached. The children gathered in the yard, faces upturned and curious. Behind them stood an older woman, her gray hair pulled into a severe bun. "That's Mrs. Abernathy," Caleb explained. "She's been helping with the children since their mother passed, but she's getting on in years." As Nora descended from the wagon, Emma, a girl with braided brown hair and her father's stern expression, stepped forward. "Are you to be our new mother?" she demanded. Nora felt Caleb stiffen beside her, but before he could speak, she knelt to meet Emma's eyes. "I'm Nora Vaughn. I've come to help care for you and your brothers and sister, if you'll allow me." "Our pa is dead," James said matter-of-factly, his small face solemn. "I know. I'm very sorry." Little Sarah, thumb in mouth, studied Nora with wide eyes before asking, "Are you an angel?" Pa said Mama became an angel. Nora's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart. Just a friend who's come to help." Mrs. Abernathy stepped forward. "Best get inside. Supper's nearly ready, and these children need washing up." That evening, after the children were asleep and Mrs. Abernathy had retired to her room, Nora found Caleb on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. "They seem like good children," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "They are. They deserve better than what life's handed them." He turned to face her. "Miss Vaughn, I need to be direct. This situation is unusual." "I'd say that's an understatement, Mr. Wright." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Indeed. I want you to know that I respect the position you're in. Your reputation is safe here. Mrs. Abernathy will act as chaperone, and I'll move my things to the bunkhouse tomorrow." "That's not necessary." "It is." His voice was firm. "Folks will talk regardless, but we can at least observe the proprieties." Nora studied him in the moonlight. There was a hardness to him, in the set of his shoulders, the careful way he held himself, but his eyes held a gentleness that intrigued her. "Why did Mr. Whalen leave everything to you instead of family?" Caleb's expression darkened. His only brother died at Antietam. His wife's family never approved of their marriage. He once said I was the son he never had. He paused. "I told him he was wrong to arrange a marriage for you without your having met him, especially with the age difference." Nora supplied. Caleb nodded. "Among other things. Yet here I am anyway. Here you are." His eyes met hers. "And you're free to leave whenever you wish. I'll ensure you have funds to go wherever you choose." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bedroom that should have been her bridal chamber, Nora faced the truth she'd been avoiding. The frontier was no place for a woman alone. Her options were few. Return east in shame, find work as a teacher or shop girl in some frontier town, or stay here where at least she had shelter and purpose with the children. She had always believed that independence was an illusion for women. Now, faced with harsh reality, that belief seemed confirmed. Safety required attachment to a man, father, husband, or employer. The frontier offered no alternatives. Spring turned to early summer, and Nora found herself settling into a rhythm at the Rocking W. The children, initially wary, began to warm to her. Emma remained the most resistant, but even she began seeking Nora's help with her reading lessons. Little Sarah followed Nora everywhere, while James quietly observed before deciding she was worthy of his trust. Caleb kept his distance, spending long days with the ranch hands and taking his meals either early or late to avoid prolonged contact with Nora. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but remote. One afternoon, as Nora hung laundry while the children played nearby, she spotted riders approaching, 3 men, dusty and hard-looking. She quickly gathered the children and hurried them inside just as Caleb rode in from the north pasture, intercepting the strangers. Through the window, she watched the tense exchange. Caleb's hand never strayed far from his holster, and though his expression remained calm, she could see the rigid set of his shoulders. After several minutes, the men rode away, but the encounter left Nora uneasy. That evening, after the children were asleep, Nora confronted Caleb in the study. Who were those men today? Caleb looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. Just passing through. They didn't look like men just passing through. He sighed, setting down his pencil. They were looking for work. You're lying, Mr. Wright. His eyes flashed. Some things aren't your concern, Miss Vaughn. They become my concern when they might affect the children I'm caring for. They stared at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. Finally, Caleb stood. Those men knew me before. From a time I don't speak of. During the war? After. His voice hardened. I rode with the gang for a time. Did things I'm not proud of. Nora's breath caught. You were an outlaw? For 18 months after the war. Until Clayton found me half dead after a posse shot me up and my friends left me behind. He met her gaze directly. I've paid for those mistakes every day since. But the past has a way of finding you, no matter how far you run. Are those men dangerous? All men can be dangerous, Miss Vaughn. But yes, particularly those men. Will they come back? Caleb moved to the window, staring out into the darkness. I don't know. They wanted me to help them with something. I refused. The children will be protected. He turned back to her, his expression fierce. I would die before letting harm come to them. Or to you. The declaration hung between them, changing something fundamental in their understanding of each other. For the first time, Nora saw beyond the careful distance Caleb maintained, to the man beneath who had survived war, made terrible choices, and found redemption through Clayton Whalen's belief in him. Why did you refuse to hold me to the marriage arrangement? She asked suddenly. Caleb's expression softened. Because no one should be given to another like property. A woman should choose her husband freely, not be handed over like cattle at auction. Even a woman with no prospects and no family. Especially then. He stepped closer, his voice low. You deserve better than a forced marriage to a man old enough to be your father. And now, you deserve better than the complications my past brings. Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Caleb drew his revolver in one fluid motion and moved to the window. It's just Peterson, he said, relaxing slightly. The pastor. Pastor Peterson brought troubling news. The men who had visited earlier had stopped in town, asking questions about Caleb Wright and the Rocking W Ranch, specifically about its ownership and the new woman staying there. They're saying things, Caleb, Peterson said gravely. About your past. About how you came by this ranch. Clayton left it to me legal and proper, Caleb said, his voice tight. I know that. But there are whispers that you somehow influenced him, or worse. The pastor glanced at Nora. And Miss Vaughn's presence is causing talk as well. What kind of talk? Nora asked. Peterson looked uncomfortable. Some say you're living in sin. Others say you've been abandoned here, victim of a scheme between Caleb and the late Mr. Whalen. That's ridiculous, Nora protested. Perhaps, Peterson conceded. But perception becomes reality in small communities. And with Caleb's past, what are you suggesting? Caleb asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. Either Miss Vaughn should return east, or you should marry, as was originally intended, just with a different groom. Peterson raised his hands as both Nora and Caleb began to object. I'm merely suggesting what would stop the gossip and potentially protect all of you, including the children, from these men who seem intent on causing trouble. After the pastor left, silence filled the study. Nora paced while Caleb stood motionless by the fireplace. It's absurd, she finally said. Is it? Caleb asked quietly. You came here to be a wife and mother. The children need stability. Are you actually considering this? I'm considering what's best for everyone involved. His eyes met hers. Those men, they're from the Blackwell gang. If they think there's something worth taking here, they'll come back. A woman alone with children makes an easy target. So I should marry you for protection? Nora felt her temper rise. Trade one arrangement for another? No. Caleb stepped closer. You should do what you believe is right. If that's returning east, I'll arrange it. If it's staying here as the children's governess, we'll weather the gossip. If it's... He hesitated. If it's marriage, it would be in name only. You would have my protection and respect, nothing more. How noble, Nora said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Another man deciding my fate. Caleb flinched as if struck. I'm not deciding anything. The choice is yours, as it always should have been. That night, unable to sleep, Nora slipped outside. The full moon illuminated the yard as she walked toward the small garden She had started near the house. The night air carried the scent of prairie grass and distant rain. A shadow detached itself from the darkness of the bunkhouse. Caleb, his tall figure unmistakable. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, keeping a respectful distance. "Too much thinking." He nodded. "Same." They stood in silence, watching as clouds drifted across the moon. "I don't want to leave," Nora finally admitted. "The children need me. And I." She took a breath. "I need them too." "They've come to love you," Caleb said softly. "As have—" He stopped abruptly. Nora turned to him. "As have what, Mr. Wright?" In the moonlight, she could see the conflict on his face. "It doesn't matter. What matters is your happiness and safety." Perhaps they're the same thing. Nora stepped closer. "I came west believing I had no choice, that independence was an illusion. But here, I found purpose. With the children. With the ranch." She met his gaze. "With you." Caleb shook his head. "You don't know me." "Not really. I know enough. I know you're a man trying to outrun his past. A man who cares deeply for 3 children who aren't his. A man who refused to hold me to an arrangement that would have benefited him." He looked away. "I've done things. We've all done things," Nora interrupted. "My parents died believing I would make an advantageous marriage. Instead, I was shipped west to marry a stranger because I was a financial burden." She touched his arm. "The past is gone, Caleb. All we have is now." Before he could respond, a shot rang out, splintering the porch post beside them. Caleb grabbed Nora, pulling her down behind the water trough as more shots followed. "The children," Nora gasped. "Stay here," Caleb ordered, drawing his revolver. But the night erupted into chaos. Men shouted from the bunkhouse as they grabbed weapons. More shots came from the darkness. Caleb fired back, keeping low. "They're after the ranch," he said grimly. Blackwell always had his eye on this valley. A terrified scream came from the house, Emma's voice. Nora's heart lurched. "Go," Caleb said. "Through the kitchen. I'll cover you." Nora raced for the house as Caleb laid down covering fire. Inside, she found Emma clutching her siblings in the hallway, all 3 children wide-eyed with terror. "Under the bed," Nora instructed, ushering them into the master bedroom. "Stay quiet, no matter what you hear." As the children huddled beneath the large bed, Nora grabbed Clayton's shotgun from above the fireplace. She had never fired a gun before, but determination steadied her hands as she checked that it was loaded, just as she had seen her father do years ago. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Through the window, Nora saw one of the ranch hands fall. Caleb was pinned down behind the horse trough, exchanging fire with shadows moving around the barn. A crash from the kitchen startled her. Someone was breaking in through the back door. Nora positioned herself in the hallway, shotgun raised, as heavy footsteps approached. A bearded man with wild eyes appeared, pistol in hand. He froze when he saw Nora with the shotgun. "Well now, what have we here?" he drawled. "Put that down, sweetheart, before you hurt yourself." "Get out," Nora said, her voice steadier than she felt. The man grinned. "You're that mail-order bride, ain't you? Old Clayton's widow that never was." He took a step forward. "Blackwell says we can have some fun with you before we burn this place down." Nora fired. The recoil slammed her back against the wall, but her aim was true. The intruder dropped, clutching his shoulder and howling in pain. She quickly reloaded, just as Caleb had shown her during a quiet afternoon weeks earlier, a skill he'd insisted might someday be useful. Caleb appeared in the doorway, blood streaming from a graze on his forehead. "Nora, the children are safe," she said, keeping the shotgun trained on the wounded man. "Is it over?" "Nearly. My men have them on the run." His eyes moved from her to the groaning intruder. "You shot him. He was going to hurt the children." Something changed in Caleb's expression, respect, admiration, and something deeper. "You're bleeding," he said, gesturing to her arm where a splinter from the doorframe had cut her. "So are you." By dawn, the attack was over. 2 of Blackwell's men were dead, 3 captured, including the one Nora had shot. The sheriff from Laramie arrived with a posse, having been alerted by one of the ranch hands who escaped during the fighting. "Been after Blackwell for years," the sheriff said as his deputies took the prisoners away. "These boys will hang, and with their testimony, we might finally get the whole gang." Nora sat on the porch steps, a blanket around her shoulders, watching as the bodies were loaded into a wagon. The children were inside with Mrs. Abernathy, finally calm after the terror of the night. Caleb sat beside her, his wound bandaged. "You were brave," he said quietly. "Braver than most men I've known." "I was terrified. That's what makes it bravery." He looked at her, his expression open in a way she'd never seen before. "I thought I was protecting you and the children by keeping my distance. But you protected them, and me, instead." Nora studied him. "Is that why you've been so distant? To protect us from your past?" "Partly." He looked down at his hands. "And partly because I didn't think I deserved." He trailed off. "Deserved what?" "Happiness. A family. You." He met her eyes. "I've believed for so long that my past defined me, that I was too broken by what I'd done to deserve love or trust. But last night, when I thought I might lose you..." Nora took his hand. "You won't lose me. I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach," he admitted. "But I told myself it was wrong, that I should keep my distance, that you deserved better. Shouldn't that be my decision?" Nora asked softly. The sun rose higher, bathing the ranch in golden light. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, unaware of the night's violence. "I don't want a marriage in name only, Caleb," Nora said. "I want a real partnership. I want the family we've already started to build with those children. I want you, your past, your present, and your future. Those things you mentioned, partnership, family, they're what I've wanted too," Caleb admitted. "But I never believed I could have them. Not after what I'd done. The past is gone." Nora repeated her words from the night before. "All we have is now." 2 weeks later, on a perfect summer morning, Nora Vaughn became Nora Wright in a simple ceremony in the Rocking W's front yard. Emma, James, and Sarah stood witness, along with the ranch hands, Mrs. Abernathy, and half the town of Willow Creek. Pastor Peterson had just pronounced them husband and wife when the sound of approaching horses interrupted the celebration. The ranch hands tensed, hands moving to weapons, but Caleb raised a hand as he recognized the riders. "U.S. Marshals," he said, stepping forward to meet them. The lead marshal, a weathered man with a silver star on his chest, dismounted. "Caleb Wright." "Yes, sir. I'm Marshal Thomas Harrington." He looked around at the wedding party. "Seems we've interrupted something." "Just got married," Caleb said, reaching back to take Nora's hand. The marshal nodded. "Well, congratulations are in order then. And so is this." He handed Caleb an official-looking document. "Full pardon, signed by the governor. Your testimony against the Blackwell gang was enough to convince him your debt to society is paid." Murmurs rippled through the assembled guests. Caleb stared at the paper in disbelief. "There's more," the marshal continued. "We found papers at Blackwell's hideout. Seems he'd been planning to take over this ranch for years. He's the one who arranged for Clayton Whalen's accident." "Wasn't an accident at all." Nora gasped. "Clayton was murdered?" "Appears so. Blackwell had one of his men spook Whalen's horse near that ravine." The marshal looked at Caleb. He thought with Whalen gone, the ranch would be vulnerable. "Didn't count on you being named heir, or on Mrs. Wright here being made of sterner stuff than most." The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Clayton Whalen had been deliberately murdered, and Blackwell had planned to eliminate Caleb next, using the arrival of Nora, a seemingly defenseless woman, as the perfect opportunity to attack the ranch when its new owner might be distracted. What no one had counted on was Nora herself. Far from the helpless Eastern girl they had expected, she had proven herself as tough and resourceful as any frontier woman born to the life. Her actions during the attack became the stuff of local legend. The bride-to-be who defended her new family with Clayton Whalen's shotgun. By Christmas of 1872, the Rocking W Ranch was thriving under Caleb and Nora's joint management. The ranch house, expanded to accommodate their growing family, glowed with warmth against the winter snow. Inside, Emma, James, and Sarah helped Nora decorate a pine tree cut from their own land, while Caleb watched from his chair by the fire, a contented smile on his face. "Tell us again how you and Mom met," James urged, hanging a wooden ornament on a branch. "You've heard that story a dozen times," Caleb laughed. "I like the part where Ma shot the bad man," Sarah said, now 5 and free of her shyness. Emma, nearly 11 and increasingly aware of the adult world, gave her stepfather a knowing look. "I like the part where you realized you loved her." Nora joined Caleb by the fire, resting her hand on his shoulder. Her other hand cradled the gentle swell of her belly, where their child grew, a new life that would join their family in the spring. "The best part," Caleb said, looking up at his wife, is right now. And tomorrow. And all the days after. Nora leaned down to kiss him, ignoring Emma's theatrical groan and the younger children's giggles. Who would have thought, she whispered against his lips, that being given to a widower would lead to this? You were never given, Nora, Caleb corrected. You chose. You chose the children. You chose this ranch. His eyes held hers, full of love and certainty. And against all odds, you chose me. On the wall above them hung a portrait of Clayton Whalen, watching over the family he had, in his own way, brought together. Perhaps, Nora sometimes thought, he had known exactly what he was doing all along. Perhaps he had seen in both her and Caleb what they had been unable to see in themselves, the capacity for love that could flourish even in the harsh realities of the frontier. Outside, snow fell gently on the Wyoming wilderness. But inside the walls of the rocking W, Nora Wright had found what she never expected when she stepped off that stagecoach. Not just security or purpose, but a love strong enough to heal the wounds of the past and brave enough to face whatever the future might bring.